right, we're 1 minute past, so we'll go ahead and get started here. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. So for those of you I haven't met, I do recognize some names in the attendees list, but for those I haven't met, my name is Austin Pretch. I've been with Oasis for a little over 2 years now as a solution architect and senior consultant. Worked in the NetSuite space for about 8 years in total. But today, what I'm excited to do is just speak on Oasis' behalf as we host this session on NetSuite EPM and more specifically planning and budgeting. So really recently, Oasis sent myself and my coworker Hussein down to Oracle's headquarters in Austin, Texas, and we had some in-person EPM training, and it was an absolutely incredible experience. So we got to go visit the campus, attend those sessions, and we came back super energized with some new ideas for about how these tools that we're going to see today can be used. I mean, walking into the lobby, they had the F1 car, the cafeteria food was great. If anybody's seen the internship movie, that's kind of what it felt like for me. But more importantly, we learned a lot about EPM and planning and budgeting. So one of the things that really stood out about this product is just how seamlessly it connects with the ERP. So really tying together budgeting, forecasting, and stakeholder reporting with an advanced AI architecture that has the full weight of Oracle behind it. So there's a lot of really exciting innovations that shine here, scenario planning, forecasting. So we're going to see a lot of that today. So excited to see about what's coming. And it's clear that a lot of innovation is on the way. So with that, I do want to thank Oracle and in particular Pam Kight for joining us today. So Pam is going to be leading today's demo, and we're grateful for her time and expertise. We'll have some time for questions at the end, but Pam, at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
All right, thanks, Austin. So yes, Pam Kight. I'm a principal solution consultant here at NetSuite. I've actually been with NetSuite and Oracle for over 23 years, and I primarily focus in the enterprise performance management area. So really, really excited to present the NetSuite Planning and Budgeting product today. So from an agenda perspective, we'll be covering an overview of NetSuite EPM. I'll talk about some of the common challenges that we see with our customers. I'll also go through and talk about the key benefits that customers see after they've implemented NetSuite Planning and Budgeting, and then we'll jump right into the NetSuite Planning and Budgeting demonstration. Definitely, as I'm going through the presentation and demonstration today, please be sure to submit any of your questions, and we'll make sure and address them at the end of the presentation. So with NetSuite Enterprise Performance Management, it really consists of 6 different products. The NetSuite Planning and Budgeting product, which you see here highlighted in yellow, really NSPB, NetSuite Planning and Budgeting is really designed planning, budgeting, forecasting, and full reporting capabilities. It is a very robust product that's been around for a good many years. The NetSuite Account Reconciliation, you may hear the term NSAR, and that stands for NetSuite Account Reconciliation. That tool is really designed for like at month-end close when you're doing any of your account reconciliations. I know when I worked in finance, that was something that I did at every month end, looking at various accounts, being able to reconcile them, document all of the various reconciliations. So a very complete tool if you guys need something for doing account reconciliations. We also have what's called close management and consolidation, and that is really designed for your month-end close process. If you do have like any company, say like you're in acquisition mode and you've acquired a company and maybe you've got like minority interest in that company, that's where you can leverage close management and consolidation and be able to do consolidations very, very easily inside that product. There also is what's called narrative reporting, corporate tax reporting, and profitability and cost management reporting. As we talk about narrative reporting, of course, that provides quite a bit of narratives. Corporate tax is really designed for your corporate tax team. And the profitability and cost management solution That's where if you need to do any type of allocations, I see a lot of times companies may produce products, and with those products, they've got teams that work on those products. And so they may need to allocate maybe some of the product costs back to their employees. And so there is allocation capability that will enable you to do that. But that's the NetSuite EPM suite of products. So today we're going to be focused on what's called NetSuite Planning and Budgeting. You may hear the term NSPB, stands for NetSuite Planning and Budgeting. It really is an all-in-one solution. So when you think about your FP&A team, they may be doing their budgeting, in Excel. Well, with NetSuite Planning and Budgeting, it's a full, budgeting, planning, forecasting tool, as well as a reporting solution. I would say one of the big differentiators with NSPB is the pre-built sync between the NetSuite ERP and NSPB. And this is really where we've integrated the two products together. But keep in mind, full planning capabilities, you can do things such as headcount, you can do scenario planning, expense planning, revenue planning, and full reporting capabilities. There's some really nice out-of-the-box dashboards and reports that do come with the product. So a couple of things that I typically see with customers, before they've implemented a solution like NSPB is a couple of things I hear is just the lack of data synchronization with their general ledger. A lot of times if you're doing your forecasting, say in Excel, I see a lot of companies where they have inaccurate forecasting. There's a lack of scenario planning. They might want to be able to do different scenarios where they might have a what if scenario. They might look at best case, worst case, and also the ad hoc reporting capabilities. So with NetSuite Planning and Budgeting, it covers all of these various areas. So you'll easily be able to do multiple scenarios. You'll be able to do ad hoc reporting. There's full forecasting capability where you can forecast and reforecast, and then that whole data synchronization with your general ledger. And so just some of the key benefits that I've seen with customers, once they've implemented a product like NetSuite Planning and Budgeting is they really spend less time manipulating numbers and more time analyzing. I know a lot of our customers, there's a lot of cycle time reduction. I would say, when you start looking at spreadsheets, typically we see where 90% of the spreadsheets contain errors in them and you get more timely information much faster. And so you're able to create those multiple scenarios that I mentioned previously. And really, at the end of the day, finance really increases their value by using a tool like this. All right, so let's get into the exciting stuff. So from a demonstration perspective, I'll be covering some of the new exciting capabilities, AI capabilities in NetSuite Planning and Budgeting. You may hear the term, and I'm always big on, NetSuite and Oracle always has these acronyms. I always try to make sure when I throw out an acronym, we know what that means. So you may hear IPM stands for Intelligent Performance Modeling. So that is some of the newer AI capabilities that we have in the product. Of course, we've always had the predictive planning capability that's been in the product for, gosh, a good many years now, but this is some of the newer AI insight capability and machine learning that I'll be covering. We'll also go into the dashboards and reports that come with the product. There's also expense planning. I'll cover workforce planning. Of course, today we won't be covering all of the different planning methods, but just keep in mind this is a full, robust tool where if you need to do things like revenue planning, price times quantity, you might be a SaaS. You might need like a SaaS model. So, of course, all of the revenue planning is all inherent in NetSuite Planning and Budgeting. There also is capability where if you need to be able to do things like CapEx planning, prepaid planning, travel planning, that is all part of NetSuite Planning and Budgeting. So we'll just be covering kind of the surface today, but keep in mind if you guys do want to get into more of a deeper dive, be more than happy to do that. I have saved the best for last, the Smart View capability. This is some exciting capability where if you're using Microsoft Excel today, there's a component called SmartView, and that works with all of the Microsoft products. So you can leverage Microsoft Excel, you can use Microsoft Word, you can also use PowerPoint. So if you are spending a bunch of time at month end putting together, a PowerPoint package where you've got all of your reports, SmartView is going to be the answer for you. It really is a pretty slick product where you can do all of your reporting packages and put together some really nice reports. All right, so let's go into the product. All right, so a couple of things I want to point out. So I'm currently in my NetSuite application. So some key things that are really important before we jump into the product is you guys have spent a good amount of time, getting NetSuite set up and configured. And so when you start thinking about your configuration, you may have subsidiaries defined. And in this case, I'm a global company. I've got multi-currency that I currently use inside of NetSuite. I have Canadian dollars, I've got British pounds, I've got USD. And so when you start thinking about your planning and budgeting process, things like your subsidiaries, all of your setup and master data that you have defined inside of NetSuite, things like your departments, your classes, your locations, currencies, chart of accounts, those are all things that automatically flow into the NetSuite Planning and Budgeting application. Also, your master data. So for things like your item master, you might have defined products or services that you sell. And so, of course, all of that flows into NSPB, and your vendors, customers, employees, expense categories flow in there as well. So just keep in mind, when you start thinking about your planning, maybe you're doing expense planning and you have a brand new expense account that you define in NetSuite Planning and Budgeting, that automatically flows. You don't have to maintain two different systems and, manage your chart of account in NetSuite and then have to make sure you manage that in NSPB. We've integrated those together. So that takes that headache really out of the equation. So do like to bring that up because that is very important. The segmentation, typically companies will, do their planning and budgeting, by these different segments or dimensions. Now, the other thing too is when you access the NetSuite Planning and Budgeting application, think of it as just another module. It would be like if you don't have fixed assets in NetSuite today, it's just another module that you would turn on and enable. So when we access NetSuite Planning and Budgeting, you just simply access it directly from here. I like to open it up into another window. And so this is really kind of your landing page or home page when it comes to NetSuite Planning and Budgeting. So here on my home page, we've really tried to make it easy for a finance team or FP&A team where when they're doing things like reporting, they know that they can go just to the simple tile or icon right here that says reporting and analytics. Now, if you're more on the planning and budgeting side, you do revenue planning. You just simply click here and that takes you directly into your revenue planning. Same thing for expenses, same thing for workforce. Now, I will go through and I probably won't be talking about this or demonstrating this today, but I will point this out, is if you are planning on doing like any planning for your balance sheet or maybe your income statement or cash flow, you definitely have the capability to plan. And so there are worksheets and so forth that show, again, kind of a forecast and your actuals directly here. Now, I did mention the intelligent performance modeling capabilities, the IPM. And so this is really some new exciting capabilities that you're going to see inside of NetSuite Planning and Budgeting. So let me first start off. There's quite a few things in here. There are things where you can configure IPM. There are insights that you can see, and we'll definitely go into the insights. There are machine learning models that you can import directly in here. But this IPM is really designed and it basically informs your planning decisions with predictive capabilities, and it really will accelerate your insight discovery. It basically contains different financial pattern recognition. And so as we go into the insights, I'll point out a couple of things. Up here at the top, you have the capability where you can look at, on these various insights, there are what are called predictions. And so that's what you're seeing here. And then we also have, and you can filter on these up here at the top if you want to come in and maybe we just want to look at anomalies. There are anomalies, there are forecast variance and bias insights. And so if we want to come in and select, any or all of these, we can just simply come in here and it will display all of these, on the page. Or if we want to filter for an anomaly, we can just filter on that. But let me explain a little bit about what this means. So on the prediction insights, what this does is it will help you uncover significant deviations in forecasts compared to the predicted values. And so what this insight does is it looks for variances between two future scenarios, such as a forecast that you would generate and then a computer generated prediction. And it can calculate a measure for risk. So you might even have things like a risk of meeting a particular target. That could be basically a prediction insight. And by comparing a planner's forecast with the machine generated predictions, this measures the variance as well as the presence of any hidden biases. So we'll definitely get into these. I'll kind of dig into the prediction insights in just a few minutes, but definitely wanted to explain a little bit about what this means. The forecast variance and bias, that indicates and reveals hidden biases in forecasts submitted by planners by analyzing historical data. And so this type of measure, really it's between two historical scenarios, such as a forecast and actuals. And it will actually calculate the percentage of risk associated with the current forecast. So that's kind of the forecast and variance bias. And then there's also anomalies. And so on the anomalies, let me kind of scroll down to the anomaly down here at the bottom. The anomaly insight, what that does is it will detect unusual patterns in your data that deviate from expected results. And so what this does is it will go in and detect outlier values that vary widely from other values. So you might have, a sudden volatility in actuals as compared to the base level. And so this is really where you can identify those different anomalies. So if we go back up, again, I'd like to talk about the different types that you can do. So, on the predictions, if we kind of look at a given prediction, what you'll notice right here is I have various customers that I work with. And so Magento or Magneto and Abbott and Blue Pumpkin, those are some of the customers that I work with. And so if we wanted to go in and look at this prediction insight, what it's going to show me here is I'm looking at a 12-month period for fiscal year 24. And so I basically have a forecast right here. We can look at the curve here in the darker green color. And so that's a forecast that I basically have generated. And then the base prediction, that actually is the machine generated prediction. And so here what we can do is we can see down here, it will kind of show the numbers for the forecast over the 12-month time frame. And then if we want to look at various insights, this is where the AI capability is coming into play, where it basically is stating here that I've got predicted sales for the coming 12 months. It's anticipated to reach 2.15 million in contrast to the forecast that's at 2.22 million. And so it will basically kind of give you kind of your percentages, what your difference is, and the dollar amounts. And so it's basically putting together the AI, the insights. And then it also has the capability here where it will go through and put together like mean absolute deviations and percentages. And then you also have the capability here where if you want to put any comments into this particular prediction, you can easily do that right here. Now, if you wanted to, on any of these predictions, you can open these up into an ad hoc mode. And just like I'm going to be showing you in the demonstration a little bit later, we have all of these different templates or kind of workbooks. And so if we need to go in this particular case, I can see my forecast. I can see the model, the computer generated forecast, which is my predictive forecast. And if I need to make any changes on this, I can easily change any numbers here. You'll notice up here at the top, remember I had talked about how your chart of account structure flows over. Of course, your customer information is flowing over, department, class, items, all of that will flow directly over in here into the forecast. But definitely wanted to show, the insight capability. As I mentioned before, there is machine learning capability. You can actually import machine learning models, and it really can kind of harness the power of data science by performing what if analysis on a trained machine learning model. And so again, that can also be leveraged as well. But again, that's some of the newer AI capabilities with NetSuite planning and budgeting. All right, let me go into the reporting and dashboards. Let's talk a little bit about that. So with the dashboards, there are pre-built dashboards that come with the product. So what you're noticing here, we're looking at a particular period, the month of July. Of course, we can come over here if we want to look at another period. We just simply come over here, and again, it dynamically updates all of our charts here. But think of this really as like a main page where we can see all of our key performance indicators, our total sales, cost of sales, expenses, EBITDA, and net income. If we look at over here, this is kind of a trend graph where we can compare revenue versus expenses versus cost of goods sold. On this column here, we can look at all of our revenue as well as our expenses. And so on the revenue, if we're a product company, we can look at the products that we're selling. If we have services, maybe we're more focused on selling service. Of course, we've got our service revenue, and we can look at total sales. But we do pick up in your customer, in NetSuite, when you define customers, if you guys do have any hierarchies, what you're seeing here in this example is I've got some hierarchies where I've got my enterprise customers versus my academic versus my mid-market. So as I look at this and I want to look at my total revenue, the line chart really, I would say line charts are really better for looking at trends over time. But one of the things that you can do here is if you want to go in, there's several different options. If we want to look at our chart types in a different manner, we've got all these different chart types that we can look at. So I find where a lot of times a bar chart, it's easier to kind of compare. So if I want to come in here and look at my revenue by customer, here I can see that Abbott for the month of November was 170,000. When I kind of hover over to the next area, Blue Pumpkins, 297, Cheddar Points, 330. So we definitely have the capability to analyze our revenue, not only by customer, but also by item. So here, if we want to look at that, this again is pulling from NetSuite. This is all of the different items that I've defined in NetSuite along with the hierarchies. And so here we can see all of our various accessories. And so you definitely have the capability to look at all of your revenue by item. Again, I would probably change the different, chart type. The line doesn't really, that kind of shows more trending. On the expense by account, we can see a roll up of all of our expenses. Notice on here, this would pick up all of your departments. So if we want to look at a particular department, of course, we can simply click here and look at our sales. It's going to look at my total here. And then if we want to go in and drill in, we can just drill into, say, for example, our selling expenses. If we want to look at commissions, we can see that here. And then if we wanted to look at like our total commissions by department, we would just simply click over here. Again, when we hover over, again, we can see the total expenses and see kind of the total value for the month of December. Then, of course, if we want to look at things by department. But on here, one other thing to keep in mind, on any of these graphs, again, these are kind of busy. So if you do want to go in, you always have the capability to maximize these screens and kind of view the data a little bit, in a bigger screen here. So the dashboard, real quick, I'll just highlight the balance sheet dashboard. There are balance sheet KPIs and cash flow KPIs. Of course, we can look at that by subsidiary, by year, by month, and see the various subsidiaries. If we come up here to the top, this is really where we can look at different reports. Let me draw your attention down here to the bottom. So in this particular report, I'm looking at my month over month actuals, and I'm comparing basically my variance and my variance percentage. Now, on here, I have a budget, and one thing to keep in mind on the budget is you can have multiple versions of your budget. What we're looking at here is basically my board budget, and I'm looking at a report that consolidates everything to my total department. If you want to go in and look at a particular department, I could simply come in here and click on sales. And here we can see with our commissions, we can see we've got our commissions kind of exceeded the August budget by, looks like $7,800. And so you can put different commentary in here on your, various reports. So I think about this really can provide that collaboration for your team. Some other reports to point out here, we've got budget versus actual year to date, budget versus actual fiscal year. So you definitely have other reports that you can view. If I go in and let's just pull up our support department. And as I'm analyzing my report, I used to actually do this in finance, go and compare budget versus actual. And here I can see, gosh, I've got a big variance right here for my repairs and maintenance expense. And I see that I've got some actuals of 261. One of the big differentiators with our solution is with NetSuite Planning and Budgeting is you can drill back, and you can drill back at a high level, or you can drill back at the source, basically go back to the source transaction. So if we notice right here, we see our support department of 261. Over here on the left-hand side, we also see reference to Frisco, which Frisco is one of our vendors that actually does repairs and maintenance at our sites. And so we can we can see that this is probably a potential AP bill, but we might want to go back specifically to that AP bill and review it. And so you do have the capability to drill at a high level, or we can go back to the source transaction. And I find this, again, very handy, especially as you're analyzing cost and you're looking at expenses. You might want to look at things in revenue, or maybe you're looking at different things around payroll, where maybe your payroll provider may not be NetSuite, it might be ADP or Paycom. And you'll always be able to drill back and say, for example, you're using another payroll provider, you probably make a journal entry at month end. So if you're drilling back on numbers, it actually would drill back to a journal entry. So going back to my Frisco, I can see that I've got my Frisco bill. I can see my vendor. I can see my total amount was 271. And as we go and scroll down here, here's where I can see. And as I look at this bill, gosh, really the support department got a big hit for the month of August. And so we can definitely make, again, that notation. Now, I think another big benefit with that is as we're drilling back, and I mentioned earlier, that's how we've integrated NetSuite ERP with NetSuite Planning and Budgeting. But if we wanted to go back as we're doing our analysis, and I'm just going to close these windows here, but if I go back to my original report, this would be where I would say, gosh, I've done all this research, and I could put Frisco bill for the month of August was extremely high for the support department. And we could just simply come up here, save that, and save that onto my report. And now everyone that sees this report will actually see the commentary here. So again, with this commentary, it really does provide quite a bit of good collaboration with your team. Now, keep in mind, this is a report. You could do this on your planning worksheets. As we're, planning out our budget, you might want to put support detail in here. You definitely have that capability. This is standard capability that flows all across the NetSuite planning and budgeting application. All right, so that's the reporting capability. Let me go into the expense planning side of the house. And so on the expense planning, this is really where we're looking at. And there's definitely different templates. So you'll notice down here at the bottom, we've got expense by department, by detail. There is this predictive planning capability. This is different than the IPM. We basically have a forecasting engine that does predictions as well. And so again, that's part of standard NetSuite planning and budgeting. This functionality has actually been in NetSuite planning and budgeting for a good many years. But as we're going through and doing our planning and budgeting, you'll notice up here, you've got your actuals, you've got your budget. You might want to do things. And what you'll notice right here is we do have the options, and I'll just click on this drop-down list, is we do have the options to do rolling methods. So you can do a 3, 6, 9, 12-month rolling method. You could bring in prior year actuals, or you could do it manually. So if we wanted to bring in prior year actuals, of course, we can simply, if we want to do prior year actuals on the next 3 lines, we can simply just drag and drop that. Notice the color changes. And on our salary and wages, maybe we want to take that prior year actual and we want to adjust. And maybe we want to adjust by, let's take 7%. So we want to increase it by 7%. And then maybe on our payroll taxes, our payroll taxes are going to go up. Maybe it's 10%. Our contributions, maybe that's going to go down by, say, 3%. Of course, you can put the numbers in here. You'll notice, again, we're reducing that. So you definitely have the capability to make adjustments and use your prior year actuals. That's one way of how you can budget. Or you might want to let's just take that repairs and maintenance cost. And if we want to adjust our budget, we can adjust the data. There's this option here where you can adjust. You could put in a dollar amount, you could put in a percentage, or this grid spread. And on this grid spread, we can, again, adjust by a percentage, or we can put in, let's say, $5,000. Notice it automatically calculates the amount. And then we can do a proportional, evenly, or fill way of being able to budget. So maybe we want that to be proportional. And so that will proportionally spread that across all of the various months. So once we go in, and this could be something where you have a budget template, it goes out to all your department heads, they could complete it. Once they complete and fill out all of their various numbers, they then would just simply save that. And that is now going to be updated into the model. And so you can do this in the NetSuite Planning and Budgeting web UI, or I'm going to be talking in just a few minutes about Smart View. So you always have the capability, if you want to use Microsoft Excel, you can use the Smart View capability to do that. Real quick, I'll go in, I'll highlight a couple of other things. I see sometimes where companies will want to do expense planning more at a detailed level, and they may not do, every single line item. For example, they might just have certain items that they say, well, gosh, I need to be able to plan for this, more at a detailed line level. And so you do have the capability to do that. If I scroll down here, what you'll notice, and let me kind of focus in on the supplies expense. And I know that, later in the year, September, October, November, and December, I'm going to be doing some new hiring some new folks. And so I need to be able to plan my budget. And I've got some monitors and keyboards and chairs. And so what you'll notice here is I'm planning kind of in those next couple of months. So you do have the capability to put detailed lines in here. You can have as many detailed lines as you want. It's super easy to go in and add the lines. You can remove lines, but just keep in mind if you do need to have some supporting, details in here, you can. One other quick thing I'll show you. I do run into this with some customers where they may want to, again, you don't have to do it for every single line item, but you may have specific expenses where you might want to detail it out by vendor. So things like your phone bills or your computer equipment, you might be buying laptops from Dell. Here's a good example where I've got Dell and Emerald. They're vendors of mine that I work with, and I need to be able to budget. So in May, I need to be able to budget out, and then it looks like I don't have any budget for June, July, or August, but I do for September through December. So keep in mind that you definitely have the capability to do at the vendor level. All right, so that's the expense planning. Let me go into the workforce planning real quick. And then we'll jump into the Smart View capability. On the workforce side of the house, we have a very robust model, and I'll just kind of go through this fairly quickly, but we do have an employee roster that lists out all of your various employees. If you're using a payroll system other than Sweet People, a lot of our customers use ADP, Paycom, Paylocity, other payroll solution providers. One of the things that you can do is basically get a CSV file from your payroll provider, and you'll basically be able to import that data here into NetSuite Planning and Budgeting. So you'll notice here we've got employee rosters that show all of our employees by department, their title, their hire date, are they salary, hourly employees, along with their various rates. Do they have raises planned? We can also come over here and look at their various benefits that they're enrolled in to kind of see all of that specific data. And then we have basically a department roster here. And the department roster, again, everything's summarized. We can look at total department. We can focus in on a particular department. So here we can see our sales department. We can put placeholders in here for folks that we're going to be hiring. So all of that are templates that come with the workforce planning. Then of course you probably will have certain assumptions that'll need to be built into the model, things like your taxes and your 401k and all of your different benefit rates. You've got annual assumptions, monthly assumptions, and your pay schedule. So all of that data then rolls up to reports at a summarized level. And that goes back to your financial reports as well. So here, as we're planning and forecasting out our workforce, we can see our totals, wages, and if we scroll down here, we can see total compensation. But I may want to, we can compare 2 different years. We can see a breakdown of everything. And then we also can come over here and, again, be able to drill and look at all of our various employees. If I wanted to look at Connor, for example, and look at his total compensation and drill into like his taxable earnings and his total salary, we can easily drill. So full comprehensive workforce planning model. All right, real quick, let me go into Smart View. And remember I had talked about how you can always just any of these worksheets, templates that I'm showing, you can open them directly up into Smart View. What I see a lot of our customers do is they actually will use the Smart View application, and up here at the top, you'll notice a ribbon that says Smart View. So you'll log in to the NetSuite Planning and Budgeting application with your login credentials, and you'll notice right here, you'll log in and you'll have a Smart View panel over here on the right-hand side. All of the things that I demonstrated, all of the reports that I showed you. So if we go into things like the reporting and analytics, that month-over-month report, that current month budget versus actual report, we can access all of that same information directly from here. And so if I want to go in, let's look at my support department and refresh it. Notice that Frisco bill comment that I put in there. I see that directly here. I also have the same capabilities. If I'm not going to demonstrate this, but if you wanted to go and drill back into NetSuite, that same drill back capability that I showed you, you can do that directly from SmartView. So all of those same things you can do here. Same thing when we're talking about budgeting and the worksheets. You can make adjustments. Here's that grid spread that I talked about, the cell comments that we have. So all of that same capability you can do here in SmartView. So you can access all of your reporting, of course, the workforce, just what I demonstrated a few minutes ago, all of that same data you can see here. And then one quick thing that I'll show you from a demonstration perspective is you can definitely leverage SmartView for reporting capabilities. So here, I'll just show you up here at the top. I'll go in. What I've done is I want to look at my expenses. And I know in NetSuite, I've got my 6,000 account, which that basically summarizes all of my expenses together. And so up here at the top, I know that I've got a budget, I've got an active version. I'm currently working in US dollars. I want to be able to look at my United States subsidiary and my fiscal year 22. So I can simply come over here and refresh this particular report. Now, I'm currently in this ad hoc mode at the moment right now, but what you'll notice here is if I come over here to my total 6,000, I can expand upon that and I can see my selling expenses, all those roll-ups that you have defined in your chart of account structure. We pick all of that up. If we wanted to say, let's go in and look at our selling expenses to see what makes that 1.5 million up, we can see the total here. Same thing with G&A expenses. We can easily see that. So you have that kind of zoom in, zoom out, in the SmartView capability. You also have the capability real quick here. I mentioned earlier scenarios. So you might have multiple scenarios where you might have rolling scenarios or budget versus actual. And so right now I'm looking at my budgetary numbers. Let's go in and let's just say we want to pull in our actuals and we want to pull in our actual versus budget and actual versus budget percentage. So I can just simply, I can either drag and drop it or select them and just click here. And now what I can do is on any of these dimensions up here at the top, I can just simply drag that down. And let me just go in and delete this column to kind of pretty this up. And now I've built out a report super easily on the fly where I can compare for fiscal year 22, my budget versus actual. If you wanted to do things, so there's a period dimension. So if you want to look at things by month, by quarter, you can easily do that here in SmartView. Another thing real quick that you can do is with SmartView, you might have things like budget worksheets where in this example, I've got a total department budget and this is for T&E expenses. And I might have like a budget entry worksheet that goes out to each of my department heads. And so this could actually be all zeros. And what you would do is basically send that out to your department head. They could go fill all that out. Once they go in, they could just simply come up here and submit the data, and that is going to update the budget. So super easy to go in and do that. If you wanted a more detailed demonstration, we would be more than happy to kind of go into the SmartView capabilities. But I did want to show you how you can kind of link Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. And so you could even have examples here where I'm using Microsoft Word. Notice I've got the ribbon up here and the panel over here on the right-hand side. Notice here I've got more of a look and feel of my total budget for my T&E expenses. So we could have something like that. We could also do things here where you have a monthly reporting package in PowerPoint. Again, notice I've got my ribbon and my panel over here, and you could have different reports that show things like your revenue. You could look at expenses. Here's an example where we're looking at our T&E by department. You could have another kind of look and feel view with our T&E by department. So super easy to leverage SmartView. All right, so let me wrap up. All right, so really when it comes time to NetSuite planning and budgeting, again, we have provided the sync capability. We have templates that come with the product, the reporting and analytics, and the ad hoc capability. So again, wanted to kind of turn this over and see what questions you guys have.
So 1 second here. Let me get to the first one. Okay, the first one that I have for you, Pam, is when doing your budget or forecast, can you have multiple versions of your budget or forecast?
Yes, you definitely can have multiple versions. So what I see a lot of times with companies is they may have like a board, budget. There could be an approved version. So yes, the answer to the question is you can definitely have multiple versions. You could even have like what if, best case, worst case, those types of versions.
Let's see. The next one is in regards to scenario modeling, what are the types of scenarios that you see customers doing?
Yeah, so with the scenarios, I mean, I've seen some companies, with tariffs being such a big issue for companies, I've actually seen some companies where they've actually had a scenario related to tariffs. There are, scenarios where you could have, again, kind of a what if type scenario. You could have your actuals, you could have your budget. So there are many different, scenarios and use cases that you can have. And that is kind of an unlimited number that you could do in NetSuite planning and budgeting.
Okay, great. Okay, and then can board books be exposed in NSPB?
Oh, great question. I forgot to show that, but yes, they can be. That is something that can be exposed. When I was going into the PowerPoint and showing you that, you could have PowerPoint, you could have Microsoft Word. Those can all be exposed in the NetSuite planning and budgeting web UI.
Perfect. Okay, and I think that is it unless anybody else has any last minute questions that they want to drop either in the chat or Q&A. Okay. I think that's it, Pam.
Okay, I'll turn it back over to you guys to wrap up.
Well, thank you guys so much for attending. We appreciate your interest in NetSuite EPM. If you have questions, please feel reach out. I should have introduced myself. This is Robin Hendrick. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to myself. My email and phone number and extension are there. We'd love to continue this conversation. There is our next NetSuite EPM webinar is on September 9th. Please look out for that invite. If you love this session, that QR code will connect you to it as well. And thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to your feedback. Have a wonderful day.